Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University. Friends, it's with great enthusiasm I come to you today, episode 248. Who would have thunk it? But I'm in a great mood. You know, earlier in the week, I was communicating with Dave and Norm, my brother Norm, Denver, Dave in Chicago. We're in a group text together. And I said, "Where were you 32 years ago today?" And I stumped both of them. And I said, "You were at my wedding in Detroit, Michigan." And they're like, "Of course." They're both, of course, in the wedding party. And so celebrated that this week, the big 3-2, which shows that you can do it. You can do it. Look, it hasn't always been easy, but like they say in the Final Four, talk, survive, and advance, and move on. Another thing that's new with me, and who would have thunk this? I'm into gardening these days. Now, I'm not growing a vegetable garden, fruits. I mean, the way I'm going, that's probably my next phase, but I have got into just making our yard beautiful. So usually between 6:30 and 8 a.m. in the morning, that's where I am. I'm in our backyard. We took down a bunch of trees. And now we've planted like 150 different either flowers, trees, plants, and trying to just have this cornucopia of colors everywhere. So we've got something I love in Georgia. We've got crepe myrtles out there. We've got hydrangeas. We've got hibiscuses, all kinds of different type of hibiscuses, perennials and annuals. We've got calla lilies and canna lilies and caladiums and 17 different flowers. And so I'm out there planting, I'm watering, I'm rearranging, and it's giving me some rejuvenation because I basically live on Zoom all day. But today I want to share one thing with you. It has to do with college application. So, you know, we talk a lot about the Common Application on this podcast. And there's a reason for that. It dominates the landscape and is becoming a bigger juggernaut every year. But there are other applications out there. And some of them I've only alluded to maybe one time, and we're in year 5 of the podcast. For example, the universal application. I recall talking about that once, maybe twice. And at Zenith, it had 95 schools, but it's dwindled down now. Last I checked, there were 24 schools accepting the universal application. There's something called the Black Common Application, which is for HBCUs. It's actually pretty popular in the Atlanta area, but the most coveted HBCUs aren't on there. So maybe 1% of all students apply through the Black Common Application. There's another one out there that we haven't talked about that much. Apply Texas, exclusively for Texas schools. And this year with UT Austin, Texas A&M going on the Common App, that'll probably be even less of a force in admissions. If we were a Georgia-based only podcast, I would talk about Georgia Futures, which is basically a Common App for Georgia public schools. A lot of states have their own version of a Common App for their own institutions. But most of these apps, that are all less than 1% of the market share that's out there. And I want to have it talked about a lot is the QuestBridge app. That's very popular and growing in popularity. 48 of the most selective schools take substantial percentage of their gifted and talented under-resourced kids from QuestBridge. And it's a national network, and they love that program because of the talent of the kids that they get. And they're getting kids to that program they can't get anywhere else. And they've got the power and the clout, so they created their own application. When you have the power and the clout, you can create your own application. I mean, we literally could have a Your College Bound Kid application if we had that much power, that we could go to the colleges and say, we've started this app. This is how many people are completing it. The colleges want applications, and they're open to creative ways of getting them. I'm going to be talking with you more about direct applications and direct admission. It's something that I'm following closely because it could be the big new move on the horizon. Number of initiatives in place, there. Another one that we do talk about a lot on here is the UC app, just because that's another powerful application. Anytime you have 6 schools getting over 100,000 applications and most of the others getting, high 5 figures, that's something to reckon with. And so we talk about things in accordance with their prominence and preeminence in the college admissions world. Now, one that we have talked about here and there, never done an interview on it, but I'm monitoring closely, and that is the coalition. And the coalition really was birthed really in 2013 when the COVID app had some major issues, technological issues, when they rolled out what was called at the time CA4, which is Common App version 4. And like a lot of things, when you roll out something new, there can be a lot of technology glitches. And it caused a lot of the schools to say, whoa, pump the brakes. Why are we putting all of our eggs in this Common App basket? What if the whole thing went down? We're screwed. Maybe we should have a competitor. One, in case there's major tech issues again. And secondly, just to hold the Common App accountable. So the coalition came on and it put a stronger emphasis on access, put a stronger emphasis on, look at all the kids that we're not reaching through the current system. That was appealing. So it got a lot of the most selective schools on board, both flagships and private schools. But for the most part, it's kind of dwindled since then. I think I shared this on the podcast a few years ago, but I was at an event for 4 or 5 of the most selective schools in the country. It included places like Emory and Johns Hopkins and Notre Dame, UVA, and it was at Maggiano's. It's a really nice restaurant. They treated a bunch of counselors. And UVA got up and said that we have a big announcement. We won't be accepting the Common App this year. The counselors got up and gave a standing ovation. So I remember the admission officers there were like, whoa, wasn't expecting that reaction. But I get it, because it's really a pain as a counselor to have to deal with multiple applications. And so schools generally like the application they use the most. And so they'll say, yeah, sure, we accept the coalition, we accept the Common App, and they'll do their best not to be biased and hold it against you if you fill out an application that they are not as comfortable with or familiar with. They really will. They don't want to hurt kids. But in their mind, they're always happy to see the app that they're most used to working with, which is almost always the Common App, unless it's like, a UC or something like that, which of course takes a different application. So that's just a little bit of applications. Just know that we are following the coalition closely, though, because the change that they have undergone recently is seismic. So one of the things that schools didn't like about the coalition before is that they partnered with a technological platform that was seen as very highly suspect from an ethics standpoint. And that really had created questions with the eyes of some people with the coalition. Well, they've moved away from that partnership, and they're doing a whole new application rollout. And they have partnered with 2 of the most successful companies in college admissions, Technolutions, the parent company of Slate, and Score, the software platform that is cut massively into Naviance's market share. And so it does get your attention when you take 2 companies that are just soaring like a rocket in Score and Technolutions, parent company of Slate, and those 2 decide to partner with Coalition to form a completely different application that can be done right through Score, which so many different schools are using. So that's got my attention. And so we'll see. I'm going to kind of watch it a little more closely here. But if it takes off like I think it might, probably will, to be honest, when I think of the success of those companies, it probably is going to make sense for us to have an interview with someone from the coalition and really find out what's going on. But we haven't done an app overview in a while. I thought it'd be good to do it. I do want to make one more comment on one other topic. Linda and I talked with you guys last week. YCBK PLUS. So about once a year, my ambition, it gets ahead of my time in my day. And initially with the launch, that was the case here. I had a blog back in 2017 and 18, And when we launched the podcast, it had to stop. I just couldn't do both. Just didn't have enough hours in the day. So that blog's still around. You can go to schoolmatchforyou.com, number 4 letter U, and you'll see the blog articles are still up there from before. And we're actually going to use that framework because we've got all the categories all assembled there. But this summer was just a lot. Going to 2 episodes a week, that's been a much bigger undertaking than I anticipated. I don't know why. I should have known it, but it has been. It's mostly been the interviews. I've loved it. I mean, I've interviewing 30 of the leading admissions thought leaders in the country, but there's always a lot involved in setting an interview up. You got to work on question format. You got to explain the technology to people. You're oftentimes working with their administrative assistants and coordinating everything. There's a pre-meeting. There's a lot. I mean, it's all worth it when you get it done, but it's a big time consuming endeavor. And then, of course, I lost my father this summer. And then also I was on the road for 18 of 22 days, mostly visiting colleges as well as attending my niece's wedding. So it set us back a bit, but I cannot tell you how excited I am. I realized we just needed help. And we've got such a fantastic new teammate in Linda Depker. And you'll be hearing Linda starting in September doing some of these announcements. But she's just so great at organization, and she brings a lot of blog experience. And she's just going to help YCBK in so many ways. But I'm just asking that you'll be patient with us. You'll definitely have the new version. And it'll be more articles and shorter articles. You'll definitely have it before Thanksgiving, and just hang in there with us on that. This particular interview, I loved it so much that I've already had a meeting with Lisa about having Marichal in June do a webinar for all of our listeners where you can just come on and ask him questions because he's so knowledgeable. He has been in student affairs. He has been a college dean, and he's been at 3 institutions. Sewanee, the University of the South, in Sewanee, Tennessee, where he graduated from, spent 8 years at Middlebury College, and a number of years also at Yale. And so this is part 2. And what he does is he reveals many more areas in this part 2 where people need to really pay attention, because these are like areas where kids get in trouble in college. And I'm not going to mention all of them, but he talks about, I'll just share a couple of them. He talks about drugs, including prescription drugs. He talks about consent when it comes to physical contact, sexual advances. And those are just a few of the many other areas that he shares with you today. And he shares and he bequeaths his wisdom about what college students can do to avoid the pitfalls. And when you've been a dean and you've been in student affairs, you've seen it all. So you're able to take all that wisdom and apply it. And so listen to part 2 and enjoy, and look for us to be announcing more information for hopefully a Q&A session. I'm a little hesitant to say this because, Linda, we're talking before we've secured his commitment, but Lisa has, he actually works at the school that Lisa's kids attend. So there's a relationship there, and she's pretty confident with this much advance notice we can get him to come back. And we'll just do signups, and we'll have a Zoom session, and we'll have parents come in and students come in and just ask him anything about student life and success in college. So with no further ado, listen to part 2.
Now, even worse than drinking, illegal drugs. So talk to us about illegal drugs.
Well, as I said in my presentation that I did some time ago, having conversations about alcohol tends to be more common and perhaps even easier than to have conversations about illegal drugs or prescription drugs, partly because alcohol is legal and illegal drugs aren't. And the topic of marijuana in particular has become increasingly more difficult to discuss, partly because of the mixed messages that have been sent by the passage of medical marijuana laws and the legalization of marijuana in some states like California, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Maine, Massachusetts, and DC. Also, it's more difficult in some ways for parents to talk about illegal drugs because they have done them before. And while they may
Yes.
not do them now, they don't want to feel hypocritical by having a conversation about it when they know they've done it in the past. So what I will say is that cannabis, in particular, marijuana, is not the same as it was
No.
perhaps when we were younger. It's more
No.
potent. You don't know what it's been laced in or mixed with. The THC content is a lot higher. We know that. And the impact of marijuana is just different than it had been before. Sure, a lot of students think that it is going to be the cure for anxiety, and they would opt to do marijuana than to go to a therapist and have a conversation with a counselor.
Yes.
But marijuana actually has the opposite effect. It's not good for anxiety. It has an impact on perhaps addiction and also health impacts, and it can lead to learning and attention and memory problems and mental illnesses that impact the ability for abusers to persist and be successful in college. So the same with, I would posit the same advice to parents as I said with alcohol, is that have open-ended conversations with your student about drugs and know about drugs. I do this. I have put together this guide several years ago. I did it a couple of years ago. I got a grant. It's called A Parent and Family Guide, Talking with College Students About Alcohol and Drugs, Conversational Strategies for Effective Outcomes. It's a guide that I put together from a grant that I got a couple of years ago that gives even some language that parents should know. And some of this language is probably even outdated, even though this book is only a couple of years old, but just some terms that you might hear, like, what's dabbing, bake, break, a blunt, of course, bong, of course, shake, just words that are out there that some are older terms now, some are newer terms, but it's important for family members to sort of understand these terms, and it's easy to go online to sort of see what the terminology is.
See what the latest thing is. And I just have to say, as a clinical psychologist, people tend to take a laissez-faire view to marijuana, and I think it is because maybe it was so much less potent when they were young and they did it. But it is a big deal. It really affects adolescents. It affects their brain development. It affects it permanently. There are a lot of kids who are getting, I think, this like vomiting syndrome, a cyclical vomiting syndrome, because it is so potent. So, I mean, it is not, to my mind, it should not be legal in the form that it is now, at least. But nobody asked me. But I've just seen it ruin people's lives. I mean,
Yes, me too.
so many times, and it's heartbreaking because these are wonderful, smart, amazing people, but they are just so addicted, and that just takes over every aspect of their life. So,
and it's not just guys. Women
no,
are just as
absolutely.
guilty as well.
No,
because they believe that it's good for their anxiety, and there's lots of anxiety,
right,
but
absolutely.
it's not. It's not good for. I also want to just make sure that we're not omitting having a conversation with students about other illegal drugs like crack, cocaine,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're all
heroin.
there.
Some of those drugs are making their way back, and can be dangerous as well. And also the use of prescription drugs, using someone else's medicine that's not yours. It's a crime, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fun topics to have with your kids, but important ones. Now,
Important.
here's another fun thing to talk about with your kids, but also very important, is the idea of consent with physical contact. And I know that you've had a lot of experience with dealing with issues around this. So what can you tell us from your experiences, and how can we talk about it with our kids?
Well, it's important that any orientation event that students have to go to discuss and to learn about consent, they should go. Colleges have some colleges have erred to not make them mandatory necessarily. They just expect the students will go. But I remember making the decision at Yale to put on the orientation bulletin that it's mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
We expect everybody to come because we believe that it's important. A lot of students don't think it's important. It will never happen to me. I don't plan to be sexually active. I would never harass anyone. I think I know about this. But you might say that when you're sober. But a lot of the cases that I heard were the students were inebriated or not able to make good decisions. And so the important things that I would want parents to talk to their students about before they get to college, and because they will hear it again when they get to college, and so it won't be new, is to talk about how to obtain consent. We know that students are going to have sex. Not all of them are, but some of them are. And if they're not going to have sex, they're going to be asked if they want to have sex. And so they just are. And it's important to know what consent means. And so I'll just give a few examples of what consent is and what it's not. It's the responsibility of the person who wants to engage in a specific sexual activity to make sure that they have obtained effective consent. That's important, the word effective consent, before initiating that activity. And what I mean effective consent is active, it's clear, it's knowing, and it's voluntary. Obtaining consent also means that you have to ask. If no is the answer, no matter how loud or soft or playful or the response, no means no. You must stop. Consent in the past does not carry over to mean consent now or in the future. Each time there's an event happening sexually, you must obtain effective consent. If there is no response from your partner, don't assume that this means yes. Do not proceed. If indifference is the feeling you get when you ask, then stop. Don't proceed. If the partner says yes, then you start, and then they say no after you started, then you have to stop immediately. They can withdraw consent at any time, even after you started. If your partner is incapacitated in any way, namely due to the use of drugs or alcohol, but if they're sleeping, this means that they cannot give consent.
Right.
And in all cases of incapacitation, do not proceed ever. And so if they can understand those few things, those few points, then I think that that's a good start, but it's not the end all and be all. I've seen cases, and we often think that these are cases men against women, but it also can be gay relationships. I've also dealt with cases where a professor was violating one of their students. So it being aware of all the different scenarios, I think is really important. And knowing what the policies are is familiar, and going to the training, I think is tantamount to having a successful college experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's so much fear around this for parents. And I know that parents of girls feel that way, but I think probably parents of everyone should feel that way, that their kid is going to be, sexually abused or assaulted in some way. If they feel like that does happen, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, with the new VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act that happened, I think 7, 8, 9 years ago, students will learn that there are numbers that they can call. There are ways that they can contact someone. Also, employees who work in the college and professors, when they receive that information, they have to report it. And so that's another way that gets the attention of the people who will make decisions whether to proceed with a case or not. Students also have the ability to go to the police. The reason that a lot of colleges hear so many cases that it takes so long through the court systems to hear a case through the court system. So the college judicial body hears a lot of the sexual misconduct cases. But students also can go to the counseling center, to the police, to the dean, to the administrators, to the people who work in the residence halls. We're all reporters.
Right. So you tell anyone who works for the university, and
Exactly.
it's the entry point. Well, that's good
They
to
are a
know.
reporter. Yes, they're a reporter. The other thing I would say is that it's not that it might happen to your child. It's just having the conversation is often difficult for family members to have with their children. Any topic about sex is difficult. Alcohol, you can have that conversation. Illegal drugs, you can have it. You don't really want to, but having a conversation about sexual misconduct and having sex and things like that is just very difficult for many parents to have. But we have to break down those barriers and have these conversations. And if you can't have them, then send your child to someone who could have it with them that you trust, and also to make sure that they trust the people who are doing the work in the colleges and universities,
right?
Because they are highly trained on what to do, how to care for students. It's nothing worse than to have two people involved in a situation that can potentially harm their lives forever, whether they're the victim or the perpetrator.
Right. No, that's a really important point. Well, so maybe a little lighter topic is encouraging wellness among students at college. So how should parents try to encourage their kids to keep up their healthy habits and not just eat hot Cheetos all the time, like certain children of mine do?
Well, it's very easy to get into that rut because college is ramped up a bit. It's not just the homework and the papers and the exams that you're having as a college student. There are also many social distractions, lots of football games and athletic events and lots of parties and things like that. And so students can create for themselves unhealthy habits, eating habits and sleeping habits. And so having conversations, and even if they've been active as a high schooler, playing varsity sports, and they may not do it as much because they are so busy with other things at college, and they don't have anyone sort of monitoring them. And so one of the things that I suggest is that parents should perhaps help their students develop sort of a weekly calendar. Here's when I'm going to have fun, and here's when I'm going to study. And it's not that the calendar is so important. It's just that if you put something on paper, you can hold yourself accountable for actually following
not
through.
Just an abstract idea.
Exactly. Even if it's going on a walk or a hike, or saying, okay, I'm going to study for 3 hours and then I'm going to rest for an hour, or I'm going to go down to the common area in my residence hall and have a conversation or watch a TV program. But oftentimes it's easier to sit in front of your computer and snack on unhealthy foods and to drink lots of coffee. And that is not energetic, actually. You don't have any energy after doing that.
No, you do not.
So give yourself a way to increase your energy by going out and doing something active, whatever it may be. And that's for your mental health as well as your physical.
Absolutely.
I also say in this section that to take advantage of the opportunities in the counseling center. The counseling center often, they do lots of workshops and have seminars on wellness and taking care of yourself, and sponsoring yoga events and goat yoga events even.
Well, who doesn't feel better after goat yoga, or worse after goat yoga? But either way, you'll feel different.
Yes, and often colleges and universities have peer health educators as well that are sort of doing those kinds of activities in the residence halls as well. So just making sure that students are aware of those and taking advantage of all the different opportunities to stay healthy and to stay well.
Right. Now, obviously, there are going to be some surprises for parents as their kids go through college. Unanticipated things will happen. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I enjoyed this piece because I see it happen so often. When a student, I first meet a student when they are a first-year student, they arrive on campus so clean, cut and clean shaven and just, very young and innocent. And then when they come home for that first break, their hair is down their back. They have it in a ponytail. They have a scraggly beard, and girls may have a tongue piercing and a tattoo somewhere. And those are unanticipated things that might happen. You might see when your child comes back for that first break. And I would just encourage parents not to be alarmed by that. Of course, they don't have a lot of time to care for themselves in those kinds of ways. And in fact, some schools don't even have a place where you can cut your hair that's easily, attainable. I know at Sewanee, especially if you're a person of color, it's not a lot of people there is cutting black hair. So you're going to come home a little different. And so that's one example of some unanticipated things. But then there are also other life changes that students may let you know about when they come back home, and these can be more permanent things like, and college has a way of making students more courageous to say these things to their family members, like, mom and dad, I'm gay. Or I don't want to use that pronoun anymore. I have a different pronoun. Or they may have a different outlook on their religion. I'm atheist, and or I'm a born again Christian. It could be either or. So things like that can change too. And I just advise parents to listen, as we've been saying this entire session, to listen and to be supportive. And sometimes things like this are life events for their students that they should just sort of take in and support their students as best they can. Also, it could be a time when a student who you thought that they were going to be a doctor, they come home and decide, I don't want to do biology and chemistry. I don't like it. I don't want to do it. I want to be an art historian.
Right.
And you wonder, it's like, oh, wait a minute. I know I'm not paying $40,000, $50,000 for my child to be an art historian. Now, that's a value judgment that I have heard before, but students can change their minds. They can get fired up about something that you didn't think that they ever would. And there's nothing wrong with being an art historian or a dancer.
Certainly not. No,
not at all. And so if someone is, because you as parent don't believe that, well, how in the world are they going to earn a living being an art historian? But that's just false, because if you are passionate about something, you will find a way to earn a living. One of my favorite people, the first woman dean of Yale College, Mary Miller, is one of the most prolific art historians in the world.
Wow.
And she was the first woman dean of Yale College. She does Mayan art. And
cool.
She is now not at Yale. She is now at Out West, is the wonderful art place out west. I can't remember the name, but she has started a whole wing of Mayan art out there.
That's fantastic.
She's definitely made a living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, art history is very rigorous. It is no joke. That is my impression from taking a year of it at the University of Chicago as an undergraduate. That is a high level job. I really appreciate all this, and I know it's really going to help our listeners as they make this transition, as their kids make this transition. And I think your advice about just kind of don't panic when something unexpected comes up, but just stay calm, listen, see where it goes, expect change, right? This is a time where kids are developing their identities and trying things on, and some things are going to stick and some things are not.
That's true. I used to give a speech to students who would, I would hear them say, everybody, when I go home, everybody says I've changed, and I'm not changed. And I said, that's not right. You have changed, and you should celebrate those changes that you made. And so I encourage people to embrace the change that they're going to have when they go to college. Change is not all bad.
No, it's probably necessary, right? You
It
can't
is.
function in life as a high school senior. That just won't that won't work.
It's not going
So
to work.
things have to happen.
It's
Um,
exactly right.
Another thing that I think our listeners would really be curious to know about because we've done college spotlights on both Sewanee and Middlebury. Like, what kind of students do you think are going to be happiest at each of these schools? They're obviously very different in some ways. Like, who should go to Sewanee and who should go to Middlebury?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I think that certain students could probably do both. But I think the students that are happy at Sewanee have a fondness for tradition. Sewanee is very steeped in Southern tradition. And even though it's grappling with its history, it's still a wonderful place that has a lot of history. And it's a wonderful town community surrounded by lots of people that who have lived there for generations and can tell stories about Sewanee from the early days until now. Also, it's very beautiful. It's
That's
idyllic
what I've heard.
setting. It sits on top of the Cumberland Plateau, and it's one of the most beautiful. And I'm not saying that because I'm an alum and have worked there twice. I'm saying it because it's actually a very beautiful place. I mean, it's breathtakingly beautiful. Students who love the outdoors would love Sewanee. Caring professors, small classes, lots. It's a high degree of social activity because there's not a lot of other things to do on the campus.
So you've got to be comfortable with your students.
You have to be comfortable with the fraternity and sorority life, and you have to be comfortable with the activities that the college provides, and students provide their own activities as well. As I said, the diversity has increased tremendously. I remember when the admission office didn't go out any farther than, I don't know, the Missouri to recruit. I
Right at the
remember,
Mason-Dixon line, right?
yes, they didn't go too far, and now they go all over the world to recruit students, and so that's been reflective of the student population there. And so that's the type of student that I would say would enjoy Sewanee. Also, it has a great writing tradition. The Writers Conference is very popular for aspiring writers. The music. They have a summer music program there as well for high school students. So you just hear wonderful concerts. So it's rich in that kind of arts tradition and English and the social sciences. Also, it has a high degree of Rhodes Scholars per capita. And First Sewanee just celebrated its first African American Rhodes Scholar this past year.
Fantastic.
Yes, it's wonderful. Now, a student that might be interested in Middlebury might be interested in international and global studies. Of course, Middlebury assumed Monterey Institute out west several years ago. And so that program has really flourished. Students who would be interested in languages. It has an overall strenuous academic program, in my opinion. Students come from all over the world. Languages, of course, lots of national championships. So if you're athletic and want to play in a competitive Division III program, lots of national championships. I think when I was there for 8 years, I think there were maybe 13 national championships during that 8-year period. I know this past year, women's lacrosse, women's hockey, women's field hockey, I think all won national championships.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so it's very, very wonderful place. Very caring professors as well. They also, like Sewanee, are affiliated with the Posse program, so they're very interested in bringing in diversity. In fact, I was a Posse mentor at Middlebury when I was there.
That's a wonderful
and,
program.
It's been one of the best programs I've worked in, and I'm happy to say that my Posse, they were the second cohort, and I think they have 20 now, but they are all successful, including a vice president for something for the Cleveland Cavaliers NBA basketball team.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so my Posse has done a wonderful job in the world and contributing to society. For Yale, you didn't ask about Yale, but I can talk a little bit about
yes,
Yale.
I would love to. We would also love to hear about Yale. So
I would say a student that goes to Yale is very independent-minded, entrepreneurial spirit, a student that sometimes they have tons of ideas that need to be tamed sometimes. But it's a good thing. It's a good problem to have. They're just so rich in ideas, and they want to accomplish something. World diversity is a very New Haven is a very diverse place with its culture and its food and the people who live there. You also have a city life. You're close to New York, so if you're interested in the arts, world exposure, and it's also a historic place.
That's fabulous. No, that I feel like I can almost see these people as you've described them so beautifully. So, and that's so helpful, I think, for listeners and to know, like, that just gives us such a guide. I can tell, I think, where your heart is, though.
Where do you think my heart is?
I think it's at Sewanee, right? Because
that's where my degree is. I think my heart, and I've enjoyed every place that I've worked. I think I enjoy places that I make the decision to go there, so I'm going to enjoy it. But I would say the professional experience that I've enjoyed the most was probably at Yale.
Really? That's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful place to work. I was new to, as an African American, working as I think I was the first dean of students. I don't know any other African American dean of students who was at Yale. But it was just it was a creative experience. I was able to be the most creative I've ever been in my life working at Yale.
Well, that's amazing. It's so great that they gave you that freedom, and it sounds like you
did
did wonderful things with it. Well, every guest of your College Bound Kid podcast has to go on the hot seat, and I'm afraid that time is now for you. So hold on. So this is where we just ask you some random questions to get random answers so people get to know you a little better. So I'm just wondering, like, if we popped onto your phone or, your stereo system at home, what kind of music would we hear?
You would hear a variety of music. I'm a musician.
I did not know this.
I'm a percussionist, and I started playing percussion in the 5th grade. And so I listen to all kinds of music. If I were to purchase music, it would probably be contemporary gospel music. And the reason is because I hosted a radio show for 6 years when I was at Middlebury. I had my own radio shows called Good News with Marichal. And my listeners, I played inspirational music for the students. And but I've also been in a blues band. So I'm Marichal in the Fatback Blues Band. So I enjoy blues music, happy blues music. I don't like the sad stuff. I like the happy blues music like Keb Mo. And he's a wonderful musician, singer out of California. So you would probably see a lot of inspirational music on my phone.
Oh, well, that sounds wonderful. And you're like, there's all these facts that I'm just learning about you that, were not included in your bio, but are very important. Okay. So question number 2, what place in the world would you love to go that you haven't been able to go yet?
To the 3 continents that I haven't gone before. So South America, Antarctica, and Australia. That's where I would love to go. Now,
yeah.
I would also, I've been to France before. I studied in France, but I would, if you were to ask me about my favorite vacation, I would love to spend 10 to 12 days in a villa somewhere in the south of France, enjoying the cuisine, writing, because I'm writing, and observing, because I am an observer as a social worker. I like to observe. That's what I would love to do.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. So, and then what movies are your favorites?
I have 2. One, I've read the book, saw the movie multiple times, and went to the play on Broadway, and that's The Color Purple.
That is a wonderful movie and book and
the
play.
Second one, I didn't read a book, because I'm not sure there is a book, but I saw the movie and I saw the play on Broadway as well, and that's Billy Elliot.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing too.
I have others. But those are the ones that come out to me right now.
Right. Well, I just thank you so much. You have such a wealth of information. Yeah, I'm sure there are many topics we could interview you on, and I hope if you come back for one of those. And I just think like you're like a Renaissance man. It's like, what haven't you done? You write, you play music, you have a radio show. You're the dean. I'm very impressed. You're a model for all of us. But thank you so much for coming on, and I know our listeners are going to get so much from everything that you've given us today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Friends, on Thursday's episode, an article by Brendan Barnard of Forbes entitled College Admission, Who Knows What? And Julia's up. It's week 3, so I'll be joined by Julia Esquivel. Question from listener says this: my son has played the trumpet since the 4th grade. When we started high school, he made the decision that he wanted to stay in concert band, which I fully support. Because band meets 4 times a week, it limits his ability to take other courses. For example, our high school offers an engineering certificate if you complete certain courses. But because of his choice to stay in band, he's not able to take many electives and has chosen among those that will fit with his core classes. Is this something that we need to explain to schools? We are starting a new interview, and it is with Robert Alexander, who's the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid and Enrollment Management at the University of Rochester. It's a 70-minute interview, and it's a 2-parter. So on Thursday, you'll hear part 1 on understanding the University of Rochester. And our college spotlight is the University of Rochester. Now, friends, if your approach to selecting college is that you're trying to win a prize, trying to have everyone you know affirm your value or your worth, or is it a different approach? Are you trying to match your child's gifts, talents, and interests? Are you looking for an academic, personal, social, emotional, and financial fit with the right college? It's something we're thinking about. See you on Thursday, everybody. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel, and to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blacks. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Thursday.